My name is Tanya Finchum, along with Juliana Nykolaiszyn, and we're with the Oklahoma State University Library, and we're in Durant, Oklahoma, today to speak with John Frazier about his memories and experiences of circus life in Hugo. So thank you for having us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let's start with having you tell us when and where you were born.
I was born in Corpus Christi in 1932, and January the 30th. And I had an awful time proving that when I went in the Army. I had to have a security clearance and the top secret clearance for the outfit I was in, and I couldn't produce a birth certificate. So I talked my way into staying in without the birth certificate, and when I got out, I started hunting for it. And one of the nurses at the hospital, Spawn Hospital in Corpus Christi, she said, I'll look through the old records down in the basement. About 6 months later, she called me and they found my birth certificate. So I knew I was born.
Was the date right?
Yeah, everything was right. Mm-hmm. And everything but my middle name. My mother wanted to name me Atwood because her favorite movie star was Lionel Atwood at that time, silent movie star. And they got it garbled and they got it done as Edward. Well, I was Atwood for the first 56 years of my life, but then I changed it to Edward after when I found that out. Right? That was kind of interesting, to say the least. And that's the way I usually tell that story. So on January the 30th, 1932, nothing happened, so they call it John Frazier.
How did your family come to be in Corpus Christi?
At that time, my father was a traveling show guy, and we just happened to be there when it was time for me to be born. That's the way all of it was. My sister was born in San Francisco, and they just happened to be there, and my brother was born in Austin, Texas, and they just happened to be there. He was during those years, Dad was he was an itinerant sign painter and also a showman, a clown and whatever, balancer and so forth. So we traveled constantly. There was no home. We didn't make any routes until, I guess I was 12 or 13 years old before we stopped long enough to catch our breath. We rented a place in Indianapolis, Indiana. We stayed there, and they thought it'd be a good idea to put us in school. Bad idea. for kids who are 12 and 13 and raised on the road, free as birds, and to put you into a school somewhere like putting you in prison. Well, it didn't work. I only went to 6 weeks of Catholic school my whole life, and the rest of my education I got along the way, reading books. So I'll say that I wasn't born to the circus business. All of us kids, we were born in the entertainment business and graduated to the circus business as years went by. But we went through the whole bit. My folks were in Waterville, and my dad was motion pictures in the early silent days for a short period of time. He was a stuntman, and we county fairs, nightclubs, everything where they use entertainment. And the circus business come along quite a bit later, as far as I was concerned. When I say quite a bit later, I was like 7 or 8 years old. First show was ever on. First circus was ever on. I can still remember that to this day. And World Brothers Circus. Have you ever heard that before?
Mm-mm.
Well, that was owned by two guys. One guy's name was Rip Van Winkle, real name. And the other guy's name was Jimmy Harrington. They were the partners in the show. And it was during the tough years. It was during the Depression, of course. And we had, nobody got paid, but you got gas for your vehicle, and the cookhouse was open. But I don't know if anybody on the show, they got a salary. I was just a kid then, and I heard them talking. But we stayed with that show for quite some time, probably a half a year. And they getting our gas for our vehicle in the cookhouse. And every day in the cookhouse, it was funny, bologna and rice seemed to be the cook's favorite. We had it 3 times a day, 2 times a day, for as long as I can remember. Bologna and rice. That was 1937. And as I remember like it was yesterday, we had a lion act on the show. They had 1 lion in the arena. And the guy's name was Swede Johnson. If you show this, if anybody sees what I'm saying here, if there's some older people, they will remember some of these names. That's why I mentioned them. Sure. Because Swede was he was a lion tamer, and his son Hunky Johnson Well, it's kind of interesting to find out how Hugo got started as a show town. I don't know whether anybody's told you this or not, but the first show that was in camp there was Obert Miller. Have you heard that name, Obert?
Uh-huh.
And his two sons, Kelly and Dory. And actually, Dory's a nickname. His real name is Doris, Dores. And Kelly was the older of the two. But that old man went 22 seasons without making a dime. They bring that show in, what little show he had, it was called a Dog and Pony Show in those days. And he was in Springfield, Missouri, where his winter quarters was at that time. And he never made any money, and not enough to get it out the next season. They had to paint houses and hang paper. He was a paper hanger and house painter, and the two boys would work wherever they could to get enough money to get the show back on the road. A couple of trucks is all they had, a pony, a dog, and finally they wound up broke in Hugo. And there was a guy there that had the Chevrolet company. His name is Johnny Sturgis. Real nice guy. His home is still, well, at that time, when I first come to Hugo, his home was the most outstanding home in town. It was beautiful. But anyhow, Johnny, he fronted the money for Obert. I think he let him have 8 or 10 trucks, new trucks. That was something wow for Obert. And he went on the road, and the 23rd season, he finally had a seat. He made some money. And they wintered there in Hugo. And the old man was a very shrewd dealer, very shrewd guy. The old man and Kelly, they were both shrewd with their money. So anyhow, the show wintered there that winter, and then they come back. And Johnny Sturgis, he became like a circus fan. He liked the whole family and so forth. And every season they come in, they buy a little property and invest a little money and so forth. And the old man wound up very wealthy. And as time went by, other circuses sprung up. We had the Hugo Brothers Circus. That was Vernon Pratt. He was a local banker. He was attracted to the easy money in the circus. Easy money. And we had Stevens Brothers Circus. And I'm trying to think of the other two. I'm getting a mental block here. But anyhow, as time goes on, more people migrated to Hugo because of that. And it's like me, I raised my whole family there. And I come to the town in 1946 was the first year there was an indoor show operating out of there. The people who have outdoor circuses, tent circuses, their big dream is to have an indoor circus because they don't have to put up a tent and have all this regalia that goes along with it, you know. And every winter, somebody in Hugo would take a shot at a winter show. Well, this particular winter, there was 5 partners in the show. How they expected making the money, I'll never know. Showing them little school gymnasiums and so forth. But they called it Royal Brothers Circus. And I was a performer on that show. And that was my first introduction to Hugo, Oklahoma. That was in 1946. I think I mentioned that. And I was 17 when I got there. I turned 18 while I was in Hugo. And we trooped biggest part of the winter in and out of Hugo, Oklahoma. They didn't show on the weekend, but come back to Hugo on the weekends. Why, I don't know. But nobody made any money. We got paid, but the people who owned the show, they didn't make any money. It's been an interesting town. They had the banker, he got Vernon Pratt. Him and his brother had supermarkets through the southern Oklahoma one time, the Pratt Markets. If you look in the archives of some of these old towns, you'll see their name there. And he got in trouble with the circus business, and because he seen all that cash coming, he was a banker, and all that cash coming in that bank in the wintertime, boy, he couldn't handle that. So he had to have a circus. So he formed Hugo Brothers Circus and went out on the road and went broke in 6 weeks. He wasn't much of a showing. Vernon wasn't. His brother stayed in the grocery business. He died when he was 41 years old. And he was a heavy hitter and good promoter and so forth. I'm going to say he didn't last. The Pratt boys.
So from the time you were 7 until you rolled into Hugo when you were 17, what was going on in those 10 years?
In the 10 years in between the time I was 7 and I was 17, oh, golly. Well, not much in the circus. In the entertainment business, a whole lot. They, like I say, we were all entertainers. Maybe my sister told you that. Of one form or another, we entertained. And we worked nightclub circuits and theater circuits. And some of the places that we worked, back in the days when I'm talking about, when they had a string of theaters, well, usually one person owned them, like the Lowe's Keith Circuit, that was the big one, and they owned the Palace Theater and so forth. Well, if you're on the Lowe's Keith Circuit, you showed all the theaters. It was like 15 or 20 weeks work. Well, they had 2 or 3 little circuits down in the south, but we just barely got paid on. And let's see, one of them was Charlie Kemp Theaters, and that was the Kemp time. And the Lowe's Keith was the Lowe's Keith time, and so on and so forth. And and we worked the theater engagements. We worked county fairs. As wire walkers, jugglers, clowns, and so forth. I learned to walk the wire when I was about 9 years old, and my sister was ahead of me on the wire act. And then years later, we both done the act together, and it was pretty good. It wasn't real good, but it was pretty good. So that's pretty much it as far as we've done a little tour with a couple circuses. Like Buddy Anderson. Has anybody mentioned that name to you? Buddy E. Anderson. He was a cowboy from Emporia, Kansas, and he had a method. He would put together a circus, good circus, not a big one, but maybe 10 trucks, and then he'd sell it and get a good price for it. Then he'd build another one. And the one that I was with that he run himself was Buddy Anderson's. Get this long-winded title. Buddy Anderson's All-American Victory Circus. That's what he called it. And he couldn't ask for a better title because that's the year we won the war. And in August of that year, we dropped the bomb. And he done nothing but business. But the help was hard to get. Gas was hard to get. Moving that show was like almost impossible. But we got it from town to town. We showed out west, and where the jumps are long, and it wasn't heavy populated cities like they have in the east, And I never will forget on one occasion, when I look back on that now, on that show, we had what they call it was an 80-foot wide tent with 3 middle pieces. Well, that's 80 foot wide this way, and then with the 3 middle pieces, the circle that makes the circle, the 2 ends of the tent, that's 80 feet. Then with 3 middles, there were 3 30-foot middles, that's 90 more feet. So that's 170 foot long and 80 foot wide. That's how big the tent was we showed in. Now, how we managed to get that tent up every day, I don't know. My brother and I, we went to work on the tent besides being performers and candy butchers because help was so short. We had 2 workmen in that show. That's all we had in the whole crew. And one of them was a draft dodger, and he got arrested like a month after he got there. So now we had 1 working man. And we used to hire whatever people we could in town. When I say we, the bosses, they would hire whatever kids they could in town. Most of the time it would be girls because there were no boys available, And they would move that show. And in those days, you have to understand that there was no snake drivers. The stakes were driven by hand, sledgehammers. There was no canvas spool. You wrapped up the canvas in pieces at night, put a diaper on it, and picked it up and loaded it into the truck. Picked it up with an elephant, really, is what they normally use. They had 1 elephant on the show, poor old thing. She worked herself to death. But it was so primitive, all that stuff, that I look back now and I wonder how we done them, because we never missed a matinee. 2 o'clock shows every day, and 2 and 8 every day. We didn't show on Sunday, but we never missed a matinee. We were never late for a matinee. And they show you how hungry the people were for entertainment. In Riverton, Wyoming, the chair wagon broke down. We had no chairs. On the front side grandstand, they sold reserved seats for an extra $50. And they put the maskings up where the seats would normally be, but there were no seats there. But they still charged the people $50 to go and stand there. And the people readily paid for it, happy to see the show. Well, that was the war years for you. They wanted entertainment, and the circus was tailor-made for them because we brought the entertainment to them. And that was Buddy Anderson's All-American Victory Circus. He was quite a guy. He was a real cowboy. When I say real cowboy, he was a horseman and a rope spinner and the whole bit. And there was another interesting guy in the circus business. Cy Rubin's own Roger Rutter Circus. We worked on that show. Well, this is during that period of time you asked about. I wasn't quite ready for the Army yet. He had a big show, and he opened down in Florida, which in those days, most of the shows that opened in Florida went broke. The first 2 weeks I was on the road, it just wasn't any good down there. But he had a promotion crew in front of that thing was terrific, and he done nothing but business, just stacked them in general. And so I did. The Hagen Brothers Circus. Anybody mention that to you?
No.
Well, that's interesting. A guy alone met from Oklahoma City, and he started out as a circus fan. He desperately wanted to own a circus. He was I call him a piccolo player. He was a clarinet player in a band, and nice guy, heck of a nice guy. I think it was a Jewish fellow. I'm not sure though. Howard Cease was his name, and his wife's name is Ruth. And her brother owned the Ford Motor Company in Tonkawa. You know where Tonkawa is, and so he financed the trucks for Howard's first show. Now, where his first tent come from or the rest of the stuff, I have no idea. Well, he got that show put together, Hagen Brothers Circus, and he trooped it I was on that show when I had to go to the Army. I was the concession manager on the show. And Howard and I were good friends, and Ruth, very good friends. She made the deal with Howard. She said, you can have the circus, but every dime from the concessions comes to me. I want the concession money. So naturally, he'd agree to anything to get a circus, so he went for it. Well, I run the concessions, and every week I'd have to check up with Ruth. And the people who were there before me, the concession business in the circus, you got to understand, it was loosely run. I mean, how can you check a joint that's taking in money over the counter in all directions? There is no check. And in most instances, most of the concession managers were as crooked as snakes. And they would throw everything up and stayed up to give the boss. That's an expression we had. But anyhow, the concession managers they had previous to me were pretty good thieves. I knew most of them. And so when I got there, I gave her a straight count. She was amazed. She's like, every week she'd come and get her money, and she'd just knock her out. She's like, I can understand that. I get so much money now that I didn't get before. And then she began to realize how much money she lost. So I run the concessions there, and they had an indoor show. He called it Clyde Brothers Circus. And both these shows were headquartered out of Oklahoma City, just north of there. Not Tonkawa, but the other little town, Edmond, Oklahoma. That was the winter quarters for him. And after the outdoor show became such a headache for Howard that he preferred the indoor show. That was the shrine dates work this way. The Shriners, they pay you so much for the performance. They give you a flat rate. In those days, I signed a couple contracts for Howard. They were like $1,450 a show. In other words, and then he had to produce the whole show out of that. Well, then in turn, the producer got the concession privilege. The Shriners didn't get the concessions. They might have one or two items, but none of the good stuff, no cotton candy, popcorn, and stuff like that, So anyhow, that's the way that worked. And so Howard was more attracted to that than he was the outdoor show. So he said nuts to the outdoor show. In fact, I don't even know what become of the Hagen show, whether he sold the equipment or what happened. I don't think he did. I think he just said to heck with it. And he put all of his time on the Clyde show, very successful. He built that Clyde Brothers Circus into he was the second best shrine producer in the country at the time. His shows were outstanding, and he made a lot of money. And when it come time to sell it, he sold his show to his concessionaire. He had a guy with the name Larry Carden, and his partner name was Don Johnson, and they operated the concessions on the show for Howard because he had 2 units going in all directions. He had about 80 or 90 dates around the country, and they were all very lucrative. So anyhow, the boys bought the show. He said, I'll sell it to you. And he said, I'll take, I think it was $250,000 for it. So you give me X amount now, and then every fall when I see you, I want $50,000 more until it's paid for. Well, they made the deal. They had no trouble paying for it. They paid for it like the first or second year. They made a lot of money. They were both clever guys. And for Larry Carden, he was a pretty steady businessman. He used to own a pizza joint up in Springfield, Missouri, and then he would operate these concessions in the summertime when it was away from the restaurant business. But they took the Clyde show and run with it for, I don't know, till Larry got so sick he couldn't work anymore. And his son, actually it's a stepson that operates the show now out of Springfield, Missouri. And he doesn't call it the Clyde Brothers Circus. He calls it George Carden Circus. He's a, I got to mention this along the way. Most of the guys who own circuses have a real ego problem. If they didn't have that circus, they wouldn't have any identity. My nephew is just as guilty as the rest of them. Without that circus, they have no identity. I have a good friend now over in Florida. His name is John Pugh. He owns the Cole Circus. It used to be the Cole Brothers Clyde Beatty Circus, and he done away with the Clyde Beatty part of it. And he calls it now the Cole All-Star Circus, something like that. Very successful. He's been successful since he started as the owner of that show. That brings me to a pretty interesting guy that it's not a Hugo guy, but it's a circus guy. His name is Frank McCluskey. Did anybody mention him to you?
I've seen that name.
Frank McCluskey. He was started out as a prop boy on the ringing show years ago. Young man, he was, when I say a prop boy, that they have each crew takes care of different things in an outdoor circus. You have a tent crew, they have a boss canvasman and a tent crew, and then you have the prop crew that takes care of the inside of the, sets the ring curves and hangs the rigging. And Frank McCluskey was a prop boy and a rigger. And in fact, there was a real kind of a famous circus star. Her name was Lillian Lietzel. Maybe you've heard that name before. But he was her personal prop boy when she fell and got killed, and on the ringing show. And then I want to bring this point up before I go any further. The circus business has only produced one star. Now you stop and think about it. They produced one star. And that's Clyde Beatty. He's the only guy that became recognizable. His name was recognized the world over. He made movies and on the radio and the whole thing. And he came from the circus business. But there isn't one other person in the circus business that made it to that point. I pointed out, people get mad at me when I tell them that. The circus people do. But it's true. It's this little enclave all the circus people live in. It's a small bubble, and they all... most of them, the performers, I've been to performers so I can talk like one, but most of them, the performers, they really get an idea that they're famous. They might be famous in their little circle, but you get outside the circle and, you never heard of them. And that's why I always bring it up about Clyde Beatty, because he's the only international star that the circus business has ever produced. Now, within the realm of the circus business, Lillian Lietzel, the Melinda family, sure, we all know them, but have you ever heard of them? Maybe in the newspaper or something, but that's it. Anyhow, McCluskey, he was the prop boy in the ringing show, and then he later on became the manager. Well, when he became the manager, he instituted the gambling in the ringing show that was like, he used to say, Little Monte Carlo. He had 1/10 for the dice game, 1/10 for the card game, over the whole show. And he was in control of that in addition to being the manager. And he told me this story himself. I know it's true. I asked him where Walter Kernan come from. That was his partner later on when they bought the Clyde Beatty Circus. And I said, how did you guys meet? Where at? And he said that they were on the ringing train one night, raining like hell, and he said the train stopped for just a few minutes, and this kid was standing in the doorway of the station. And he said, I yelled at him. I said, hey, kid, you want to join the circus? And the guy said, yeah, and he jumped on the train. And he stayed there, and years later he became Frank's partner. His name was Walter Kernan. But anyhow, Frank and Walter Kernan and Jerry Collins, you wouldn't hear his name. He was a bankroll guy. He owned dog tracks in Sarasota, Orlando, racetracks, horse racetracks. I think he was involved in one when they built it out here in Oklahoma City at one time. But they were the three partners that owned they bought the Clyde Beatty Circus from Clyde Beatty. Clyde Beatty was going broke, and they got wind of it, and they thought they could make a go of it, so they went out and seen Clyde, and they bought the show from him and brought it it was on the train then. And they brought the show into Florida and put it on trucks and took it out. And man, it had nothing but money. I mean, every day. It was great. They sprung two more shows from that, the Sells Gray Circus and the King Brothers Circus. And they were all three. That was the corporation owned all three of those. And Frank McCluskey was the guy that ran them all. And Heck of a guy. But getting back to the Kelly Miller Show. The Kelly Miller Show, like I say, they didn't make a dime for 22 years. That only stayed with it. And made a success of the show. And one of the biggest successes where one person can make a difference. He had an agent on that show. The agent, you know what the agent does, the general agent. And he goes and books the town, makes all the arrangements and so forth. Not so much anymore, but they did then. Well, he had an old guy from up in, I think it was from Arkansas, booking the show for him. And all he was doing was just taking the show from town to town and making a few bucks. And Art Miller, have you heard his name before? I didn't think of it. I had mentioned him and rats over there. Art was the key to the Kelly Miller Circus, the LG Kelly Miller, not this Kelly Miller. This is a pup compared to the big one, Big Daddy. Anyhow, they brought Art in as a general agent for the thing. He used to be the agent for the Shell Sterling Circus out of Wisconsin, and he got let go early one year. They closed the show early, and I think that's where he became acquainted with D.R. Miller. D.R. was a wire walker on that show, if you can believe that or not. You've seen pictures of D.R., haven't you? And his wife Isla, she worked on the wire with him. That's it. I mean, he was never a good performer. He was a lousy performer. At least he done that. He was on Shell Sterling show when they closed the show. Well, let Art with nothing to do, so he came down and he started booking the Kelly Miller Circus. And overnight, from the time he stepped into those shoes of the general agent, because he lived and breathed it, and he would talk L.G. Kelly Miller Brothers Circus 24 hours a day. It was the only show in the country, blah, blah, but he went on and on about it. And he helmed that show into where it made serious money. The country itself, it doesn't receive a 10th show like it did in those days. And but without our booking that thing, it would have never made the grade like it did. And there's not enough people left alive that would tell you that same thing. I didn't think they taught much about art over there, and because like I say, he wasn't too well liked by a lot of people, but he was a rip snorter. Like I say, he lived and breathed the circus business 24 hours a day, and he's the one that made the success for that thing. That was a big show, good show. It's what they call a war baby. They never made no money until the war started. It was like Bud Anderson. He never made a lot of money until the war started. When the war started, then everybody made money. in those days, it was the tax business wasn't like it is now. It wasn't structured the same way, and they had an amusement tax of 20% on the tickets, and they put the amusement tax on. They didn't take it off until way after the war was over, but they put it on. Well, the way that the circus is operating, they'll open the ticket window and they'll sell tickets for about 20 minutes and shut it down. The rest of the people would pay at the gate, cash coming through. And so that really give you an abundance of cash to put in your little coffee cans and bury into your house somewhere, and that's exactly what they done. But if it wasn't for Kelly Miller, there wouldn't have been no Hugo Circus Town USA, that's for sure and certain. But here's something that always amazes me. I had another friend named Dave Hoover. He wanted to have a lion act. Got to skirt the story a little bit. There was a guy out here in Gainesville, Texas. His name was, what was his name? Well, I'll come to that in a minute. But anyhow, they used to have a circus out there. They called it the Gainesville Community Circus. And this old man that had the Coca-Cola plant, he's the one that financed it and put it together. And they would tour the show. But it was all people from Gainesville that worked in the show. Some of them weren't even circus people. They were just amateurs doing their thing, you know. And Frankie Schmitz, the guy that owned the Coca-Cola company, he's the one that financed it. He bought the lion, bought the arena, put the whole thing together, and they hired Dave Hoover to work the lion act. And anyhow, Dave Hoover and I wanted to be co-managers for the Beatty Show for Johnny Pugh. We worked together for 5 or 6 years over there.
What are some keys to success from your perspective?
What?
Keys to success from your perspective in the circus business. What do you have to do a real good job?
Your advance. This is one of the problems you have that everyone wants to get in the circus business. You say, okay, they want to buy the trucks, they want to buy the tent, they want to buy all the pretty things, they want to have the toys they can play with. I said, okay, now, are you ready to put $100,000 on the front end of this thing? Well, what the hell is that for? That's to get the towns booked and get the paper hung and and let the people know what's coming, because if they don't know what's coming, how can they buy a ticket for it? Oh, I don't. They don't want to spend that money. Isn't that stupid? Because the Carson and Barnes Circus was not founded by D.R. Miller. The founders of that show was the Moore family. That was Jack Moore, Ann Moore, and their two teenage kids, Wanda and Mike. They had another kid named Madeline. Sad story, she committed suicide. But anyhow, he was the founder of that show. Jack Moore was a good businessman. He didn't have a nickel, and he scratched around with an old wrestling bear for a year, and he had a little show. He called it Jack and Kelly's Show. That wasn't even a circus. It was just down in Louisiana. He was from East Texas over here. And he stumbled around with that show, and he bumped into DR and got DR to come up with a little financing to get him a tent and a couple of trucks and so forth. And highly successful because he knew what to do. And he was a heavy guy in the advance, and he could run a good tight ship on the show itself. Good guy, Jack Moore was. But they're the founders of the Carson and Barnes Circus. That title, that belonged to Jack Moore. And Dory tried to run the thing for a very short period of time. And had it on the road after Jack died, and she didn't have the will to do what she needed to do with that show. And DR was there trying to help her, and that's like putting a bull in the china shop. And anyhow, she finally threw the towel and sold her interest to DR. And that's how he got the Carson and Barnes title. And then they put this Kelly Miller title on the little show. I forget what year it was. About 23 years ago now. Little guy by the name of Bob Stevens. Him and his wife were concessioners. And they had the concessions on the original Kelly Miller Circus. And they were making good money there. And they had some kind of a rift between the two of them. They divorced. And she kept the concessions of the Kelly Miller show. And he took a little circus out called Stevens Brothers Circus. And it was they got nicknamed for all his name. That was the Gypsy Camp. I mean, it was never a pretty show. Bob was one of those guys that his tie was always crooked, his suit was unpressed, and his circus was the same way. And so he stumbled through, but he stayed on the road, I guess, for several years, just barely making it, from spring till fall, And he used to winter down in the valley in Texas. And he was quite a guy. She was quite a gal too. She was a concessioner for the Kelly Miller Circus. They had Tim McCoy on that show. Do you recognize that name, Tim McCoy? Mm-hmm. They had Tim come on the show. This is when Obert was still living. Obert was a shrewd guy, too shrewd sometimes, but they had Tim McCoy. I forget now how he wound up joining that show in the middle of the season, but we used to have on the shows what they call a concert. Anybody mention that to you, the concert? God, they left a lot out, didn't they? Anyhow, right in the middle of the show, they would stop the show, and all these horse riders would come in, these cowboys and cowgirls and hooting and hollering, and they would make this big, long-winded announcement that after the show, while the boys were taking down the outside of the tent, they would have an after show, which was called a concert or after show in the big top, and it consisted of cowboys, cowgirls, shoot 'em up, and so forth. And everybody that was in the tent, they could buy a ticket for that show now. And if they weren't sitting in the reserve seats, they could go ahead and move to the reserve seats immediately when they bought their ticket for the concert. Well, then, after the show was over, the main show was over, everybody scrambled out the front door. Well, then they started taking everything down that they could, the seats that weren't filled and so forth. And Tim McCoy joined that show in the middle of the season. And I don't think anybody realized what an attraction he was going to be. He had just become well known to another generation of people by being on the $64,000 Question on television. You remember that show? Well, he was on that show, and the publicity from that show made him a star again. He was a movie star in the silent days, and so anyhow they started making the announcement for the concert, and they said we're featuring Tim McCoy. Well, everybody stayed. I mean, just jammed the tent. Everybody that was in there stayed there for, I think it was an extra $50 for the concert. And, Ober couldn't stand that because they had a deal with Tim that he would get 50% of the concert. And that lasted till the end of that season. And Over told me, so we want to protect you so you make sure and get your money every week. We'll give you a salary. Well, Tim McCoy wouldn't go for that. He said, take it and stick it. And Jack Moore was smart enough to grab him before he left town. And he said, will you come and go with my show? And he said, I'll make whatever deal you want to make. And he made him a good deal, good salary and so forth. And Tim McCoy, he was with Jack either 1 or 2 years. My God, the business that show had done it was awesome, because he was right smack on top of it, because he had done the $64,000 question, then he'd done something else. I forget what right behind that. But Tim McCoy was on everybody's lips from coast to coast. And Jack and I, we got along good. I worked on his show as a superintendent twice. I had to lead the show.
Do you know much about the boat show?
The boat show?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about it?
What do you know about it so far?
Just very little.
That it sank.
That was an outstanding idea that DR had. Believe me, that would have been the big winner. But like always, he goes in $1 short. If DR was going to build a chain, the chain would be perfect except for this link right in the middle, and he would glue it together with a rubber band. And that's what he done with that boat show. He bought a ship down there. He sent an accountant down there, Dale Hammond. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but he was the chief accountant in Hugo, Oklahoma. And he sent him down to look at these ships that were for sale. And he come back and told him, he said, there's a liner down there for I forget how many. The difference in price between the two boats was $10,000. I do remember that. I don't know how much it was. But he says, you can buy the liner. It's got everything is there. The tablecloths, the silverware. It's a first-class ship. And you can buy it for X amount of dollars. And but the other ship was $10,000 cheaper. It was a piece of junk. And they, what the hell was the name of that thing? I'll think of it. Anyhow, they couldn't get a captain for it. That's how bad that ship was. They finally got a captain out of, he was a great big black guy. What was his? He was out of Haiti. Haiti, we call it then. They call it Haiti now. Haiti, but he was a captain from there or one of those other South Pacific islands, and so away they go with the ship up the coast. And they show one spot when they were loading the thing in Florida. I remember they dropped the light plant in the ocean, and it's still there, to the best of my knowledge. They had to buy another light plant. The boat is leaking. I mean, they got every bilge pump in there working like hell to keep that water out of there. And Lucy's. How is she related to him? Okie is married to Lucy's daughter. Anybody talk about Okie or Don Carr?
No.
Okay, well, Don Carr was on that boat show. He was the only guy that I know of. I would have liked to have been on that boat show. I had a circus out heading for the West Coast at the time that I heard about this. And somebody called me and told me about it. And I told Dory finally come up with a first-rate #1 idea. He had 5 years of paper on that thing. When I say paper, I mean billing, for the towns. And his idea was to show up the coast of the east coast of this country and then go across to Ireland, down there, go around the Horn, show everything. Never come back for 5 or 6 years. And the only problem was he bought the wrong damn boat. They got up to Nova Scotia, and the thing caught on fire. It was in the harbor, and it caught on fire. And the Okie was trying to get the animals off the thing. I'm surprised that Lucy didn't mention Okie to you. Give me a minute, I'll think of what the relationship is there between the two of them. Anyhow, he was in there trying to get these animals off the boat. I mean, it was like Noah's Ark. They had giraffes, elephants, donkeys, and the whole thing. And Okie got everything off, got them all untied, and got them loose. And the last thing was a mule. It was funny because Okie told me about it. He said the water was coming in so fast from the bottom, it just shot right out the hatch. And the mule was on top of the wave, and out he went, and he got saved. But the boat hadn't sunk. And what I'm telling you is a true story. Everything I've told you so far is true. I wouldn't lie a bit. Anyhow, DR, he had the boat insured, but he wasn't familiar with maritime insurance at all. And he was up crying his beer in a little restaurant, him and Isla and whoever was with him, and about the boat. It was listed off to one side, about ready to sink. And some guy come in and asked me, he said, "You guy owns that boat?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you have hull insurance?" And Durant said, "Hell, I don't know what kind of insurance I got." He said, "Well, if you ain't got hull insurance," he said, "if that boat sinks now," he said, "you won't get a nickel from your insurance company." You say, do you have hull insurance? Well, they went frantically looking for what kind of insurance they had. Well, the guy said, well, he said, we have to sink it. He said, if that boat won't sink, you won't get paid. And so the guy, when it was getting dark then, and this was in Halifax, and the guy went in a rowboat around the other side and opened all the hatches that were still above the water and sunk the boat. And Dory got an insurance check for the boat because of that. And that night, when the people were, the reason why I know so much about this, so the woman that owns the newspaper in Boston, she also owns the newspaper in Halifax. She's kind of like Graham was at the Washington Post. She's her husband died not too long after they were married, and she inherited these newspapers, and she's done a hell of a job of running them. And when I was up in Canada, DI asked me, he said, if you can locate somebody up there, he might have some pictures of that boat sinking up there, and I'd like to have them, something, anything. So that's what got me started on the boat thing. Anyhow, that night when the thing was sunk, you could see all the Canada guys going out there. They're getting sealing the brass and the compasses and whatever they could seal off the boat. So there was nothing left the next day. And anyhow, Dory got his check for the insurance off the thing, and no animals. I think one either a mule or a horse, I think, died in that thing, but everything else got off. And now here's Dory with all that stuff from the show was on shore, because he had the show off, the tent and all that stuff, but the boat, nobody to get it home. So there he sits with all that, brand new concession stuff, new cotton candy machines, popcorn machines, all went down with the ship, and didn't have that off there. So I went, anyhow, I hunted up this lady, and I asked her, I said, would you happen to have an old picture laying around of that thing? She said, my husband was a circus fan, and he was out there from morning till night shooting pictures of the whole thing. She said, I have no interest in those pictures. I'll give them all to you. And she gave me an album that they put together, the whole thing, from the time the ship got there in Halifax and the time it caught on fire and it sunk, everything. She had it all in film, and she did hand me the whole thing. I sent it down to the DR. If he would have bought the other ship, of all the good ideas that DR has come up with, that was one of them. That would have been just Jim dandy, because there's so many places you could go with a ship that you can't go with trucks, And that got me started. I was stumbling around with a little circus from coast to coast down here, and I thought, well, that's the way to go, is on a boat, because we were fighting the truck battles then. I mean, they were awful. Every weight station, they would find you. It was a lot worse than it is today. And I was going to buy a barge and go up the river with it. And some guy he made a deal with the car companies to bring the boats from Detroit, bring the cars from Detroit down the Mississippi and to southern towns down there. And the government, he made one load with these barges, and the government says, no, told the car companies, you put those cars back in the railroad, because the government was involved with the railroad. Well, the barges were sitting in Joplin, Missouri. I went down and looked at them, and they just perfect for a circus. 3 decks. I can just visualize the circus being on. I could never bring it to pass. But Dory's Boat Show, I wish I could remember the name of that boat.
It's La Flores or something, wasn't it? An F.
Fortaleza. Fortaleza.
Something like that.
I think it was the Fortaleza, yeah. And they got the first, when they first started up the coast with it, the engines went afoul, and it's out adrift. And they were looking for the boat and couldn't find it. The Coast Guard was looking for it. And Dory went and rented an airplane. He was a pretty good pilot. And so he flew out, and he found the ship. He spotted it and then radioed the Coast Guard. So he flew back, and the Coast Guard brought it back into the port in Wilmington, North Carolina. And Dory, he's all hot on the collar at the captain. Oh, this is so funny. He fired the captain. He said, he blamed everything. They were running out of water and everything. Okie was on the show. He said, they were drinking the soda pop and giving it to the elephants. They had no drinking water. And anyhow, when they got the ship in, the Coast Guard towed it in for them. And when they got it in, well, Dory immediately fired the big black captain. And the captain laughed at him. And Dory didn't know why, but he found out later on. He tried to hire somebody else to captain that boat for him. Well, I guess in the boat business, it's like the circus business. They have their reputation. Everybody knew that ship, and nobody would go near it, because he couldn't hire a captain, so he had to go back to the same guy and almost double his salary to go back. That's the story of the boat show. They come stumbling back to Hugo with that stuff. They hired trucks and railroad cars and everything else to get all that junk back here. Everything they had was on the ship. That was like I say, that would have been one hell of an idea. I wish he would have bought the other boat. They said when he went there, Dale went down in the hull of the boat that he bought and was chipping at the rust, and the water started coming through. Did you hear the term Dunaker from anybody over there?
We figured out what that was.
You figured out what that was. The reason why I brought that up, there was a family in Hugo, the Loader family. Dick Loader was the patriarch. He was the daddy, and they wanted to take a circus on the road, and they called it Dunaker Brothers Circus. And they opened and closed in about 10 days. They had about 10 spots and coming back in, but that's what they call it, Dunaker Brothers Circus. And one of the Vernon Pratt's nephew was involved in that. He was a partner in that show. We were putting together a show at the time, myself and a fellow named Floyd Bradbury, very good organist. He's one of us that's still alive. He's down in Florida. But we were putting together a show to take out a Hugo, and I think everybody got the idea. It was kind of a joke thing, we weren't too serious about it. And the Dunaker brothers followed right in behind us. So we were on the road and took off, and I heard about this Dunaker Brothers Circus. And Dick Loader, after I left town, we took that little show down in Louisiana, and showed about 6 weeks. I leased a whole bunch of stuff from Herb Walters. Somebody over there must have mentioned Herb Walters to you.
Yes.
What did I tell you about him?
I think it was Mary that told us a little bit about him.
About Herb, yeah. And he was a funny old guy. Somebody asked me about the Showman's Club. Maybe it was BK. I had to set her straight in a minute because she told me that Ted Bowman, she thought that he was the instigator of the Showman's Club. And have you heard the name Ted Bowman? Mm-hmm. Ted was not the instigator of the Showman's Club. The Hugo had a Showman's Club long before Ted ever back in the town. And the original Showman's Club was upstairs. You know where the Security Bank is downtown in Hugo? You know where the Chamber of Commerce is?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay, well, the Chamber of Commerce is here, the Security Bank is here, there's a street here. Well, right across the street, there's a restaurant right over here. I think it's a restaurant now. There have been 2 or 3 restaurants in there and went broke. But right above that is where the Showman's Club was. And in 1951, I come blasting into town. I just closed with Nykolaiszyn, and I come into Hugo, and they were having a big party up there. And Herb Walters and his daughter, they were very clever entertainers. They were dramatic show people. And they were right in the midst of singing one of their funny old songs when I got there that night. And that's the first time I ever met Herb. And we talked and so forth. But the upstairs that there was just one story above the street, and did anybody over there mention Frank Ellis to you? Oh, what a pity! Frank is now we're going to tell a whole new story. The shows in the so-called good old days, it had legal adjusters. The legal adjusters were on the grift shows, the shows that had gambling. None of the Hugo shows that I know of ever had gambling on the show. Herb Walters wanted to have it, but he didn't know how. And they have what they call a broad mob. The guy, the 3-card monte, that was a broad mob. The guy that had a shell game, and they really had these games in the sideshow. On the shows they had the grift. Bud Anderson was the big grift show. On his show, there was about 35 guys in the grift department and 2 guys putting the tent up. And they all had funny names. Big Roberts, the Colonel, Beefneck Charlie. They all had nicknames, all these gamblers. Anyhow, Frank Ellis was the legal adjuster. He's the one that would square the beef if you got a beef in town. There was another little guy named Jack Turner. He wanted to be one of my stepfathers later on, but he was the legal adjuster. But he was the legal adjuster on a big grift show out west. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But Frank had a beef with the local gamblers somehow or another in Hugo. Hugo used to be kind of a wild town. I mean, it was true in gangsterism on that main street. Well, Frank got in a big beef with the gamblers, and they hung him out that window in the Showman's Club. Said, "You're either going to pay us or we're going to drop you." People think that's not a real story, but that is a real story. Frank and Jack Turner, he was the.
Well, at what point in your career did you say, "I'm tired of working for a circus. I want to own one"?
At what point in my career, I think that let's see. I guess after I finished the tour with the Hagen Brothers Circus, running the concessions there, that probably planted the seed because the concession money was so heavy, you know. And then I had my tour in the Army I had to go for, and I went to service for 3 years. And when I got out, and for my career, working for people like Herb Walters, D.R. Miller, and so forth, and they, you'd have to think, my God, if they can do it, I can do it twice as good. that was really the thoughts. And the first legitimate show that I ever had was in Canada. I had a partner up there. I had the concessions on the King Brothers Circus. My brother-in-law was the manager, Herring, and this little fat guy come on the lot. He was looking for a partner for a circus in Canada. Well, I knew that Canada well. I showed 2 years up there with Jack, for one thing. And the other thing was that I used to study that map constantly, and there had never been a Canadian tent show in Canada. And there's places where they never had a tent show in Canada. And I used to look at it wistfully. And I guess if you was going to say, at that point in my life is when I said, that's when I want to have a circus. And they had this Al Stencil is the guy's name. And somebody sent him to me. He come to Harry and they sent him to me and said I should talk to you because I want to take a circus up in Canada. And I listened to what he had to say, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, you go up and you get the first 50 or 60 days, whatever it was, get it booked, and I'll bring your circus to the border. I never expected to see the guy again. And anyhow, I got a phone call about a month later. He said, I got 30 days booked. I said, you're kidding me. I said, well, that's great. So I started putting a circus together down here, and for what I had, and to build a circus in those years took a lot of money. And I didn't have that much money. I borrowed a few bucks here and a few bucks there, but I got a show together and got it up to the border, and we got it open. My God, it was awful. It was just rain every day and cold as hell, but the people never stopped coming. We just packed and jammed that thing every show.
And what was it called?
Royal Brothers.
Royal
Brothers Circus. And anyhow, we at the end of the season, we were counting the money on Al's coffee table in his mother-in-law's house. And Al was quite a bit younger than I was, and had never made nothing more than a salary working in a TV joint. And he was just enthralled with the snow. And this is your half, this is my half. And I said, well, if this is all there, then he started talking about next year. And I said, Al, I got to be truthful with you. This is all there is to it. I won't be here next year. I said, we got to do something different. And he said, you don't want to get it bigger, do you? And I said, a hell of a lot bigger. And he said, no. I said, I always wanted a small show. And I said, small show, small profit. Big show, big profit. I said, you figure it out. And I went home. And he called me and told me, he said, well, he says, me and Shirley talked it over, and we're willing to go along with it. And I said, well, that's great. I called DR and got myself a great big tent and 4 or 5 trucks, and I leased another elephant, and we had a big show then. And we took that sucker to Canada, and we did do business. That's the year they made the movie. Not that year, the next year they made the movie of us. High Grass Circus. You seen it?
I've seen a little bit on YouTube.
Yeah, Google it. Mm-hmm. You can see it there. Anyhow, we had we had a great big tent with a sideshow and everything. And now that year when we come in, we counted the money. We had something to count. And I told Al, I said, are you still in love with the movie circuses? No. So the next year, I told him, I said, let's go to Newfoundland. Let's take the show to Newfoundland. Never been a tent show there. And there hasn't been one since. And so I went up and I booked half of Newfoundland. And I had to get out of there. Big blizzard was coming. And they were going to close the ferries. And I had to get home in a hurry. And so I come back and Al finished booking we had 30 some days in Newfoundland. I wish you could have seen that. The people just stood in awe looking at that. We would roll a sideshow out, and all ooh and ah and hoot and holler and so forth. And the sideshow was kind of small. We'll get that big top and roll it out and put it up, and then they really set them on fire. And we had a pretty good show, too. We trooped all the way from Newfoundland all the way up to Saskatchewan, everything in between, and it highly successful. I enjoyed it. I don't think I would want to have a circus now because everything is different now. That's the problem. My kids, my oldest boy, he took a shot here 8 or 10 years ago. I tried to talk him out of it. I said, it just ain't the same, John. I said, like it used to be. You're going to run into more permits and more regulations and so forth. Well, they blew about 60 grand and never made a quarter and made a lot of enemies in the thing. And but that's the problem with the circus. But then when my kids were all raised in the business, it was great. It was, the best time of their lives now when they talk about it is, when we had the show and they run it and so forth. But it's not that way now. It's as different as night and day as to be around these shows now as it was then. It was fun.
Well, did yours winter in Hugo then? This particular one from Canada?
I went in Hugo with the show and stayed in Canada. And then I sold my interest to Al, which he's never paid me to this day. Yeah, he took a little show out the next year and lost his butt with it. And my brother, he wanted to be in the circus business. And I said, well, there's a circus for sale down here in the valley. I said, they're up against it and the tax people are after them. I said, BK and her husband. I said, let's go down and buy it. I said, if you want to be in the circus, that's the way to do it. And it was a hell of a deal. In fact, I told BK, I said, you guys are selling this thing short. Well, I think she wanted out. But anyhow, we bought that show. It's Fisher Brothers Circus. That's what Mel and BK called it before. And the first year we had it out, let's see, was at 1976 was the second year. The second year we had it that we wintered in Hugo here. And that's when we put the thing on the road as a 1776 Circus, Fisher Brothers. And we won some pretty serious money. And we had the perfect combination because I ran the show, my brother was the agent. And he was a terrific guy. I taught him. He was a good agent. When I say I taught him, he had the personality for it. He could go in and talk to those committees and turn them around and get anything he wanted from them. And whereas I could get it booked, but I couldn't, not like he could. And so we had the perfect combination, booked some more and so forth. I kept it out all summer like that, 40 some odd weeks. And I wound up closing in Kaufman, Texas down here. And I closed with about 85 cents less than what I had when I opened, which was nothing. And I will forget, the last day down there, we had 2 ragged old bears. I worked in the show. They were trained bears. And bears are mean. They ain't no such thing as a nice bear. And and we kept them in the backyard, kept them well guarded and so forth. And I had a guy to work for me. His name was Turtle Benson. He's dead now. And I said, for Christ's sake, keep an eye on those bears because anybody gets back there, they'll snatch them. Well, sure as hell, some pot-smoking girl will come back there. Oh, I just love these bears. And well, they shoot her up from one end to the other. 96 holes when I got her to the hospital. I forget how many stitches to close her up. And I thought, here comes the lawsuit. Well, they'll take it all. And I had her on the midway and just blood going every place. And the girl wasn't passed out. She was awake and talking. And her mother come over. And her mother started yelling at her. And she looked up at her mother and you just see the disgust rolling out of her eyes. She said, what the hell are you doing here? She said, you wouldn't give a damn if I died. So all you're looking for is a lawsuit. So get the hell out of here. So I never got a lawsuit. And the girl, she knew it was her fault. She said, I'm the one that went under the guard rope and defied the guy and grabbed the bear, and the bear shooed the hell out of me. So I went up to the hospital to see her the next day, and she was fine and dandy and all patched up, got bandages from one end and the other. And she apologized to me instead of me to her. Well, then Dory Miller walked on my lot. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to Arizona with the show and keep it out all winter. And next spring, take it back up to Canada. He says, well, I did not know that Dory was sick. Dory was very, very sick. He had a kidney problem. He said, why don't you come up and partner with me? We'll put a big show out. He said, there's another show that I'm going to buy. That's another circus I forgot all about. Sid Kellner. James Brothers Circus. It was a big show. And he went broke. And he had it all stored up in Ohio. And Dory made him a deal for it. And but he needed somebody to run the second show. He needed more than that. I didn't know it. Anyhow, Dory says, now, here's the deal. My show has to be out and running before your show, before you start working on your show. So I had to get this big tub of junk out here down the highway. They were jumping to Austin for the first day. It's snowing like hell. It was awful. We had an awful time getting that thing out of there. But he went, and then I started collecting my stuff up from Ohio. I had 25 trucks up there loaded full of gills with everything, and then brought it down and started working on it to get that go out that spring. And the other part of the deal is Dory told me, he said, that now my agent has to book both shows. I said, for Christ's sake, Dory. I said, your agent can't book your show. You sat beside the highway for 9 days up in Pennsylvania last year. Well, he said, that's okay. He's got some more people now, but that has to be. There's so much a contract and he books it. Well, that was a big mistake.
Well, what else do we need to know about Hugo that you know, people, of course, are only telling us certain things. What do you think that are those little things that people are leaving out of the record?
Oh, I don't think you really want to know. Most of the people are dead. It wouldn't bother them if I talked about them, but they...
Well, compare it to when you first came, like when you were 17
Oh,
or 18.
Hugo?
To
My God, it's like New York City and Durant. Hugo was a swinging town when I first got there in 1946. There's two major railroads crossing the town, one going west and one going south. And 5 hotels. There was 5 hotels that stayed busy all the time. And in the wintertime, it was great because there was so many show people there. We started talking about the Showman's Club a while ago, and the Showman's Club went defunct. And Art Miller, the guy I told you was a hotshot agent, he was a member of the Elks Club, and so was I. So we sat half drunk one night and said, let's just have an Elks Club and make it a Showman's Club. So we got 10 other guys. You had to have 12 people to get a charter for an Elks Club. So we got 10 guys like in a few hours. And we got the people to come down to Oklahoma City and make us an Elks Club. Well, the Elks Club is where I celebrated my 18th birthday many years before. It was called Max Fish and Chips, or the Bloody Bucket. That's what they call it then. And we formed the Elks Club there. And it was really the Showman's Club. We had the big Christmas party for the kids, and we had showman's dances and all of it at the Elks Club. That was the real Highline Showman's Club at one time.
So you had some people outside of Circus in the Elks Club too, right?
Oh yeah, that's what ruined it.
Like the Baggots, Mr. Baggott?
Yes, Herman Baggott.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a good guy. His son is, Charles. They had... Herman Baggott all the show people, that's what they bought their vehicles in the wintertime from him. Herman was, what happened to that Elks Club is the officers in the Elks Club were all show guys when we put it together. And then when we were on the road one summer, they had a meeting in the Elks Club, and they unelected all the show guys and elected the town guys. Well, that brought it to an end. They don't operate the same way. That's the problem. If you've been to a meeting to book a circus, I'll give you an idea. You'll get into a meeting with 10 or 12 people from the Lions Club. You want them to sponsor the circus, right? Okay, well, you're in there talking, and there's one question, and you know what all the questions are going to be. They all ask the same thing. But there's always one guy, I used to call him the coattail puller. He wouldn't ask you a question himself. That's the guy next to him, ask him this. And it would take, you would have to spend several hours to get a decision made to bring a damn circus to town. You know, it was goofy. And it gets worse now. It's worse than it's ever been. That's why it's not interesting anymore to do that. And the Elks Club, it went to hell shortly thereafter. The show guys are the ones that kept it going. Not that I got anything against the town guys, don't get me wrong, they're all good people. But they don't operate the same way. And the Christmas party went to hell, and the dances that we used to have and so forth.
Do you have any memories of modern trailer park?
Oh, I got a lot. Did they tell you much about Willie Rawls, Harry's dad? Harry and I worked together as a comedy team for a long time, and Willie was the father. I doubt very much I mention him, but he was kind of he was my mentor.
Would you mind talking a about Hazel? We hear some
I don't
stories
know.
about Hazel, but nothing real.
Who told you about Hazel?
I hear she's a heck of a cook. That's what I've heard.
Well, she wound up being a very good cook.
But outside of that, I know very little.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of strange. And well, this has little to do with the circus business, but you want me to tell you? Okay, the way that we met, I had a. They used to have the dances. They had one called the Brown Derby and Antlers, and one someplace else, and go out of town for these dances because we could buy moonshine liquor there. And they, anyhow, I had a date with one of the performers. Now that's kind of stupid. I can't remember her name. I will in a minute. I had a date with her. I said, let's go up and so and so. Okay, and we'll go to the dance. And Hazel, she was at the kid then. She was about 18, I think. She bummed a ride in the same car I was in. Charlie Rex was driving. Charlie and his wife. She said, "Can I ride up with you?" I said, "Sure, why not?" Well, she was going up to meet this boy. The boy's name was. Whoa, testing my memory on this one. But anyhow, when we got there, Hazel gets out of the car, but my date, the girl that I brought up, she got out of the car, so I run over and grabbed the guy that Hazel was supposed to meet, big hug and a kiss, and went to the dance. so Hazel's standing there, and I said, "Well, I guess it's you and me, kid." And we went to the dance. That's how we met. And and then we dated for the rest of that winter, which wasn't too long because we're getting ready to go on the road. When I left town with the show, I gave Hazel a route card. You used to have 2 weeks of town on it. I said, "Here." I said, if you're serious, then join me before this route card is up. But if you don't show up, I'll know that's nothing to it. Well, anyhow, Hazel joined the show, and she was a good trooper. We got along real good, and I had to leave the show. That was Herb Walter's Circus, and he did not have any front end on that show. He had no agents. Nobody knew what the hell they were doing. And he made the big announcement in the Big Top one day, if the business doesn't pick up, we're going to have to close this show on the 4th of July. Well, that meant everybody was out of a job. So I went to Herb and I told him, I said, "Let me go out and book this thing." And I said, "Hazel will stay here and drive my truck." And I said, "I'll book it and see if we can't get some business going." And we did. I started booking the good towns and promoting the hell out of it and so forth. And we started packing and jamming people and started making some pretty serious money. And anyhow, we closed that season. That would have been 1957. I just come through a rotten divorce. I won the custody of my daughter. My oldest daughter is 55. My youngest daughter is 9. Anyhow, I just won the custody of her, and through that divorce, I'm trying to think. Then Hazel and I we didn't troupe much together on other shows. How was it? 57? Yeah, I was 58, I can't remember much about. 59, I was the first year I was a recognized agent. I went and got myself a job as a general agent for Herb Walter's Circus. That was a mistake. They had too many partners. One partner wanted to go to California, the other one wanted to go to the East. And I couldn't talk to both partners at the same time. I had to call the one guy on Wednesday and the other one on Sunday. Somebody would say, "What are you doing in South Dakota? You're supposed to be in so-and-so." And then Wednesday, "What the hell are you doing in Minnesota? You're supposed to be on the way to California." So I went all summer like that. I booked 2 complete routes. And fast I was booking, they cancel them. And Hazel was with me on that booking. That's where she learned to book. She'd be with me at every meeting and everything. And she was sharp as a tack. She was good at it. And that was 59. 60, we took the unit. 59. 60, we took the unit into Canada. Took the affair unit into Canada. She was with us. And I got so damn mad at Harry. Hazel wanted to be a performer. She wasn't built to be a performer. So I got a loop-to-loop rigging. It's a rigging that you plant your feet in, and it's like a trapeze rigging, but it's not ropes. They're stiff pipes, to hold on to. And you can teach anyone to do the loop-to-loop in 20 minutes because you just pump the thing until you go all the way over. And you got little clicks in your feet, little things in your feet that slide into the bar that hold you there, so you can't fall out of it. And so I was teaching her to do the loop-to-loop. Yeah, we got along great. The only thing that whipped our marriage was Hazel was insanely jealous. I mean, it's funny, but when I talk to other people, I have one granddaughter that told me, she said, the reason why you and Hazel got divorced because of your jealousy. I've never been jealous in my life, and never, and everybody knows that. And I guess Hazel told her that, but it was one of those things where if you would have stayed in the situation, my kids would have been worthless, I would have been worthless, and so forth, and a decision had to be made. And of course, under the circumstances, I was in Florida, around people that I'd known for years and years down there, and under the circumstances, the word had that I was going for another female. Furthest thing from the truth. I was down there with Jim Normark promoting towns and doing my thing in Florida, and there's no way that I could have continued living like I was living. I'd get up and look in the mirror myself in the morning and say, "What kind of a think are you?" And it was going to affect the kids as they grew up. Well, I never said nothing to the kids about anything. I told Hazel I still want to get a divorce, and we divorced. That was that. And all the kids wound up pretty good. No warped heads in the family. And I preached to them constantly as they were growing up, for Christ's sake, get out of this business. It ain't going to be here like you know it now when you grow up. And it ain't. The circus business is like black and white different now than it was then. Yeah, and Hazel wound up, I got so damn mad when I found out what she was doing, because she came down to the valley when I was promoting down there, booking towns and promoting country western shows and whatever, magic shows and that, and doing real well. And she wasn't doing nothing. I said, "Well," I said, "come down here and book these towns for me." I said, "Hell, we don't have to stay mad at each other." She said, "Okay." So I give her a pretty good sized bankroll. My son gets mad at me to this day because of it. I give her a pretty good sized bankroll, and I said, "We'll just start here and here and here." And she didn't. She drove right to Hugo and got a job with the circus. And the only thing that made me mad about that was she sold herself too cheap. She run that cookhouse over there for a lousy $200 a week. That's what they paid her. And believe me, on that show, if you're the cook, I mean, that's an awful job. I wouldn't do it for $1,000 a week. But I guess she was very good for him. Too good for him, really.
Doc Goody said she was a very good cook.
She was, yes, she is. She was a damn good cook. Her mother was a good cook. Her mother cooked on my little show in Canada, and that's the reason why I kept a working crew up there all the time, because every morning she'd have homemade biscuits and gravy and a whole bit for them, And Hazel was a good cook too. I had no. Hazel was a good person. She was okay. She could have whipped that youngest straight. That was horrible. Her youngest daughter, Audrey, she's the one that found her dead. And she come up to see her, and when she come to the house, well, Hazel had died that night and on the floor next to the bed, and that was kind of bad. But like I say, we managed to stay pretty friendly. Some of our beefs that we had. I was trying to think what Hazel booked the Kelly Miller show for a while. Did they tell you that? Yeah, when David first got the show, I think the second year that he owned the show, he wanted to go to Canada. Well, he picked the right person. He picked Hazel because she knew every town up there, and she booked it 2 or 3 years, and same old story. They don't know how to treat their advanced people. They want to take and piece you off with nothing, And she booked them into the good towns, good spots, and so forth. Somebody should have come up with something, a bonus or anything. But as it was, they short-sheeted her, and she said, "Well, that's that," and she wouldn't go back again. And it was really a loss for them, because Hazel was a damn good agent. She was a good agent. The few towns that she booked for me before she left completely was down in Texas, and every place where I come in behind her, all the bases were covered and so forth. Never had to worry about it. It was good. She was good.
Well, you traveled around a lot. Why settle here? Or stay put here?
In Calera, my son bought a place over here in Calera. It's about 5 miles south of here, and I said, "Well, if you're going to stay here," I said, "maybe I'll come and buy a place sometime." And I come and bought this few acres I got over here, and the day that I bought it, the day before I bought that, he sold his place, and because he had to transfer and go down to get a little closer to Dallas. He was working down there. He said, if I had any idea that you were really going to buy that place, I said, well, what the hell could I tell you? I told you I was going to buy it. And he said, I would have stayed there. He had a real nice home out here on Jackrabbit Alley, they call it. The place he has now is all right, but this is much better than what he had up here. And the commute isn't that far to Dallas. It's an hour drive, hour and a half. Now, that was a big mistake on his part. That was the only attraction. Other than that, I could have wound up any place. My wife is going to graduate as a nurse in May. She wanted to be a nurse with an associate degree, and I said, no. I said, that doesn't work. If you're going to be a nurse, you get the Bachelor of Science. Because if you've got that BS, that's about 3 steps higher than, I said, if you're an associate degree nurse, you're just an LPN, not much bigger. And so she went ahead, and she added the language. She's from Mexico, you know. And the language problem was brutal, getting her through that, her first two and a half years of college. But she made it at a 4.0 average. And she's doing well now. And she's got, like I say, she has this semester, the rest of this semester and next semester, and then she's done. And we were talking about going to Florida maybe. I don't know how true that is. One thing about it, you can go where you want to go.
So do people still call you up for circus advice?
Once in a while.
Well, what do you miss most about the business, or do you miss the business?
I miss it. Staying in one place is difficult for me. I got like I say, out here, and I'm not complaining about it. I have a daughter that's 9 years old, and that naturally she needs a little care and so forth. She's going to school in Calera, but I miss the traveling. And the things that mean the most to most people that aren't in the business mean very little to me. And I mean, it's like the house and the place and so forth. You know, that's just material things. They never have meant too much to me. That's one of the problems that Hazel and I had. If you had a buck, you had a buck. If you didn't, you didn't. It was as simple as that. And it's the same way now. We have a nice place out there. I call it the nice place. We have pigs and chickens and horses and all that stuff and everything. But it doesn't mean as much to me as it would to somebody else. I know that. One thing you miss, and I don't care if anybody else tells you any different, they're lying. You miss being the boss, because if you do run a circus of any size, the last show that I had up in Canada, I had 85 people on the show. We were feeding them 3 meals a day. We were sleeping them. We were taking care and listening to their psychobabble and the whole thing. You know, so that naturally you would miss that, because it's like you're close. You're a lot closer to your employees and to everybody, from the lowest working man to the high-line performer. You know all the problems and so forth, and you're their big daddy, and you do miss that. I guess that's what you miss most of all. They had trials and tribulations of taking the show from one town to another, and you miss that too. And
well, where do you see the circus headed in the next 10, 20 years?
No further than what it is right now. The tent shows will be gone completely. There won't be any tent shows. The Cold Circus, they had a good season this year. Everybody's trying to figure out why. But if you live long enough, you know why. When times get tough, people go for cheaper entertainment. Going to a circus is cheap. I booked the Carson and Barnes show in here for 2 days, and at the Indian place out here, the casino, I put it in our parking lot 2 years ago. And I had one of my friends took his family out there, and he said, Frazier, he said, this is the best entertainment in the world. And you can see the point, because the kids get in free nowadays. You give coupons just to attract them. And the guy told me, he said, I bought $50 with me. We seen the show. Everybody had cotton candy, peanuts, and so forth. We rode the elephant, rode the ponies, and I got $3 left. You can't go to a movie and do that. So that's the secret to the circus. But if the times get tough, the circus business gets better. If they had anybody on the front end of that Carson and Barnes show and knew where to take it and what to do with it, they would be doing business now. The Cold Circus, hell, they had a hell of a season. and it's about the same size show and everything. Right? The little shows, I don't know, Culpeper, that's one of the shows that the winner over there. I know that guy. He's not your ordinary showman. Have you met him?
Not yet.
His name is Trey Key. Well, when you meet him, you'll see that he's not. He's an exclusive guy. He's kind of in a shell, and he doesn't have much to say about anything to anybody anytime. and but his show keeps plodding along. I got a new tent this year. I didn't know that. It's a good thing. He had nothing but spider webs last year. But they seem to be making a little bit of money with the thing.
It in smaller towns.
Yeah. If I was going to put a show on the road now, I hate to say if I was 20 years younger, but if I was 20 years younger, I'd be 60. Yeah, that's young enough. I'll be 80 in January. But if I was going to put a show on the road now, that's exactly what I would do. I would have a tent that would seat about anywhere from 6 to 100 to 1,000 people, and I would head in these smaller towns, and because they don't, you take like the people who live where I live, they can't go to a movie. If they got 3 kids, you go to a movie, it costs you $100, and the people that live out in these little towns, they can't do that. And the little towns like Van Alstyne, like Calera, and so forth, you got sponsors, they sell a few tickets and everything. You can make it. But here's the difference. I'm glad you asked. Somebody asked me this the other day. When you had the circus, that's all you had. Your whole life was right there on that lot. And when we moved from one lot to another lot, then your life was on that lot. There was no homes. There was no schools to go to, and so on and so forth. The circus was the whole life. It's not that way now. And you take, like now, if you want to hire a performer, and I preached 15, 20 years ago to the performers and the same thing. A guy does a trapeze act, maybe he's got a dog act, maybe he's got a trained pony. Okay, he's got 3 acts. He can put 15 minutes in your show tops. Now, he wants you to pay him enough money that he can have a trailer that costs $60,000, a truck costs $40,000 to pull it, a home in Florida, and his kid's going to college. And he only wants to work 6 months a year. How in the hell can you do that? You can't do it, you know. And that's the big difference. There's a friend of mine that has a show right here in town tonight. He's producing the show for the Shriners. Yeah, what time is it?
Almost 5.
But if you wanted to turn the clock back, and I got a trailer sitting in my backyard now, a Cougar, and I have my truck, and I have an old horse I could break in about a month, and I could go down the highway with a tent. I've got several tents. I don't know what they told you now. I have a tent rental business in Hugo. My other son, Darren, he works for the Choctaw Electric Company over there. He was 11 years old. He took care of 11 elephants, 11 full-size elephants. I had a boss elephant guy and a helper, and they both quit. And Darren was a helper. So I said, well, it's your cup of tea, my friend. I can't do it. So he took care of the elephants for the rest of the season. So he is a lineman for the Choctaw Electric Company, and he loves it. That's all he wants to be. He's good at it, too. But anyhow, like I say, if your whole life was on that circus like it was then, and you wasn't worried about a home and so forth, well, you know, the money you took in every day was yours, and you go to the mountain trailer park and pay $30 a month. That's it. Or you rented the winter quarters like I done, you know, for the whole show. And yeah, if you could do it, I would do that again. But that can't be done. Not anymore. Not like it used to be.
The economics have changed.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Did you ever blow the arrows?
Yeah, a few times. I got the biggest kick up in Canada one time. My brother was putting the arrows up for the show. He was the 24-hour man for the Canadian show out there. And you know what a 24-hour man is. He goes ahead and lays the lot out and so forth. And then, anyhow, we were on the Queens Expressway, and one of them Canadian coppers don't carry guns and got the hi-hat and so forth. I come out and say, young man, what are you doing? He said, well, we got a circus coming through here. And of course, he'd been out of the business for a long time. He didn't have a sense to lie. He said, we got a circus coming through here, and we got to put these arrows up because if they don't follow the arrows, they'll get lost. And the guy reached over and pulled the arrow down, and he says, not on the Queens Expressway. I got the biggest kick out of that when Cork told me about it. There was another time, it was way up in the jungles in northern Alberta, out in the middle of nowhere, and I was coming around the curve in the hill, and there was this highway guys, a crew was all together, and they had one of our arrows looking at it. They were trying to figure out what the hell it was. You could tell by the quizzical look on their faces. What is this thing, you know? They pulled it off the post that was on the side of the road. I just drove by and let them keep wondering. Yeah, the arrows got us in a lot of trouble sometimes. You know, years ago, they didn't do it that way. Did anybody tell you how they marked the shows a long time ago?
Not before the arrows, no.
Well, what a bunch of clowns over there. They had a gaff in a truck. You see them put the lines on baseball fields? You know, turn the crank of the line and goes down. Well, they built one of those into a truck. And when you're going down the highway, when you make a turn, you turn the crank, and the white line goes around like that. And we had a drunk on the Bud Anderson show. Every morning he'd get lost. He'd be following this white line out, and all of a sudden, bango, there'd be a big no in the middle of the road, and a big U-turn like that and back, and you'd have to go get another road someplace. I'd forgotten all about that, but that's how they used to mark the roads. The high-class shows that had that line drop. Now, the little bitty shows over in the east who didn't have much money, now the way they mark their roads is the candy boxes and popcorn boxes they pick up on the lot at night, but when the guy would make a turn, he'd throw them out the window. And then you'd follow the boxes around there. Nobody told you that over there? Strange. That's the difference in an agent nowadays. When the guy out on the highway, he goes inside the contract someplace. But in the so-called good old days, when it's like the year I was first started as an agent, you had to go in and get the sponsor book to town. You put in all the press, the newspaper, the radio, whatever media there was. In other words, you laid the press, that's what they call it. You had your press portfolios, you made up the little sheets and so forth, because in those days they had lead presses. They didn't have offset and so forth like they do now. And you had the mats and the layout sheets and the whole bit. You get out the newspaper, and then you went and you located where the hay was in town, where they could buy hay for the elephant. And then you went and located the water, where they could fill the water tank. And then you drove the route to the next town. If you had a weight station or something out there, if you didn't want to go over, then you double back and you drove another route and find another one. The agent done all that. I look back now and I wonder how and then at the end of the week, you sit there with your little typewriter, and if you're lucky enough to go to a motel, and you order the Heralds. That's the little newspaper sheet they send to, in those days they sent it through the mail. And the Herald order, you had to get the book from the post office, and you looked up the country routes. Star Route and Route 2 and Route 4 and see how many people was on each one, because you had to type that order in and send it to the guy up in Iowa. And then he sent them to the post office, and they sent these little newspapers out about the show coming to town. And you had to order the paper once a week. So that was all done by one guy. If you asked some guy to do that now, they wouldn't know what the hell you were talking about, I don't think. I mean, but I don't know how we done it. There was no cell phones, no fax machines. There was no, everything was Western Union or a pay telephone. I used to carry a pocket full of quarters with me all the time so I could call back to the show. And the only way you could call the show is if, like, you booked the town if there was a cafe or something close by, or you call the police department. So you could just send somebody out and tell them I'm trying to get a hold of them. And then they'd come back and call you back at the phone you were at. Or if there was a restaurant nearby, you could get them to do it and so forth. That's how it all worked then.
A lot different than today.
Oh, yeah. A lot different. And like I don't know how we done it, to tell you the truth. But we did. We managed to get drunk on Sundays and have a good time, so forth.
Would you change anything? Would you change anything or do anything different?
No. I don't know a thing. I've had 5 wonderful marriages. I got a whole bunch of good kids. I don't know. I wouldn't change nothing.
You might have bought that boat.
You
would have bought the boat.
Yeah, I would have bought the boat. That's one thing. Another part of that boat, I was looking at those barges, and a guy come down and asked me what I was doing. I told him I was looking. I said I was thinking about maybe putting a circus on one of these things. Well, this guy, he happened to be a dealer that sold what they call a sea mule. And he said, these are push barges. And he said, but I've invented this thing called a sea mule. It's like an outboard motor. It's a great big gigantic diesel engine. You bolts onto the barge, and he said, now, if you're going to get one of those, you're going to need one of these. And they that made it real. I thought, boy, can you see it though? You have all your cookhouse and your performers up on the top part, and then the next one down, your wagons and so forth, and the bottom deck would be your stock. And take the lead stock off, then the wagon up. It would have been perfect, and no highway patrol, by the way.
No way station.
It would have been a good no way station. It would have been a good idea. That's where Durant's idea was so good. I really wish that I could have been with that thing. That might have changed the whole view of it. He didn't have very many people around him then that were movers and shakers. Durant didn't.
Well, I know we just skimmed the surface with you and touched upon many different things, but is there anything else you'd like to share before we end up closing out today? Anything we missed that's big and glaring?
Well, there's I tried to think of things about Hugo because that's or Oklahoma, what this is all about. And it might be interesting to know that are you familiar with the 101 Ranch in Oklahoma? Then you know about what's his name, Zach and boys that had that show. I tell the story, nobody wants to believe it, but there was a color guy on that show that threw a bull with his teeth. His name was Bill Pickett.
From Boley, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. You can look that up and find out that should be a true story. They tie his hands behind him, and they turn the bull loose, and he would grab the bull by the nose and throw him. Bill Pickett. My dad was on that show, a young guy. And my father was kind of an interesting guy. He was you ever see a movie called Tarnished Angels? And you ever see a movie called The Great Waldo Pepper? Okay, well, those are two you got to Google because it tells a really good story. My dad was a pilot in the First World War, and these guys that flew those kites, I call them. I mean, they were just a motor with a couple of wings on them, and the thrill of what they done during the war, they couldn't shake it. When they come home, they were all outlaws. Because of the way they lived when they were flying those little flying machines, you know. And Dad put together what they call a flying circus. Jack Williams, a human fly. He used to climb buildings. I got a picture of him in Oklahoma City climbing a building years ago. And did Mary show you the scrapbook? She shows you the scrapbook. Well, you're familiar with that, yeah. And when they made that movie, it was so interesting because my dad was a lot like that. He couldn't find himself when he got out of the service. He went in all directions, and it's easy to see why. You're over there every day. You're shooting back and forth at each other and so forth with them airplanes, and then you get back over here and they discharge you from the Army Air Force and say, okay, you're a civilian now. Well, how the hell do you handle that? That's what the movie Tarnished Angels. When you see that movie, if you ever see it, you'll understand what I mean. And I don't think that my dad was the hotshot pilot that he professed to be. When I tell the other kids this, they get mad and hell at me. But I think that he was one hell of a good promoter, and he was that. But when it comes to the flying part of it, I don't think he done too much. And just from the different tales he told me and so forth, you know. And I was talking about my father when he wasn't, like I said, the hotshot pilot that the other kids think he was. He was a promoter and a good promoter. And that's why this movie, The Great Waldo Pepper, is so close to being him. I told my brother a long time ago, I said, I got a good idea for a movie. And I said, I got just the guys to star in it and so on and so on. I was telling him about this on the telephone. And about the antique airplanes and the old-fashioned cars. And I said, Cliff Robertson he's an antique freak for airplanes, so we can get him to work in it. And about 3 months later, Court called me and told me, he said, have you seen The Great Waldo Pepper? He said, it's your movie. He said, just exactly like you explained it. And so I went and seen the picture show, and I truly think that whoever made that picture knew my father, because he wasn't a hotshot pilot. He didn't do a lot of flying overseas or nothing, but he was good. He could fly an airplane as good as anybody, And he wanted to prove himself, but didn't quite know how. Robert Redford played the part in the movie. Go see that movie, and you'll see what I'm talking about, because he never got a chance to show himself as a service pilot, shooting other people and so forth. But he was good. I want to tell you something that I know that my cohorts and Hugo have brought up about some Finky show. Oh, the Royal Brothers Circus. You know why we named it the Royal Brothers Circus? Because nobody can steal your title, because you can't copyright that name in Canada. It belongs to the Queen. So when me and my partner split, he named his show Martin and Downs, and it went defunct in a hurry. But the Royal Brothers, he was afraid that I would come back up, I think, and do the Royal Brothers Circus thing again. That movie helped us out a lot up there. They'd done another movie before they'd done the High Grass Circus, a TV company. They wanted to try out their new equipment. That's what it was all about. They had an editing machine on a truck and so forth. They said, could we come and film this show? And I said, sure, why not? And I said, as long as we get to see what you're filming before you turn it loose to the public, nothing derogatory. So they done a real nice half-hour film. I forget what they call it now. But they had the control of the stations up there, and they could show that film about a week ahead of us. And boy, you talk about big help. It was a big help. And the High Grass Circus, every spring, Al would call the National Film Board up there and tell them we were coming, where we was going to open, and always make sure and show the show before we got there. And it was a help, big help.
Good PR piece. A good PR piece.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. The High Grass Circus, Canada's only tent show. Well, there's you could talk forever if you just jump from one thing to another like this, because there's so many people. It's like Ben Davenport. I could just tell stories about Ben, and it would take the next 6 hours. But he was a good showman. Ben was, and the reason why he was a good showman, because he was a fan of the circus. Ben was not materialistic. And he wanted to see the flags wave and the people in the tent and so forth. There was one particular instance where the health department come out. I forget the name of the town now. It was here in the States. But they were going to close his snow cone joint. Because in Michigan, years ago, the only ice you could buy in Michigan was lake ice. They didn't have the big ice machines in those days. And so you couldn't sell snow cones. So it might have been in Michigan he'd done this. So while the health inspector was with him, he gave the guy the high sign that had the snow joint, and told him to get them snow cones in a tent, sell them nickel a piece, get a snow cone in every kid's hand. So he stalled about a half hour with the health guy. Then they walked in the tent, and every kid in the tent's got a snow cone. The health guy says, "Oh, the hell with it," and went home. But that's just one of many, many stories about Ben. He was and Willie. Willie was a grifter on the show. They always had when they had the gambling, in the tents. They were normally on the sideshow, and they always have what they call an outside man. The guy run the game, and then you'd have somebody out in the public acting as if he was one of the town guys, and he would prod the guys into betting, and also he would take and make a couple of bets himself and so forth. But you couldn't beat those games, believe me. Those guys, they were magical. Like the 3-card monte thing, they'd crimp that card. The guy would falter and look down like this, and one of the outside man would grab that card. He would tell the guy betting you, "I'll fix him," and he'd bend the card. And not that way you'll know now when you see it. Well, as he's tossing that card, he's straightening that crimp out and put a crimp in another one. And so the guy that's making the heavy bet, he's just sure he knows, because the crimp card is the red queen. He puts it in the blackjack. That's some of the things how it worked, And interesting, really interesting. And of course, that was big business in those shows in those days. They moved those shows then. They had that Bud Anderson show, I think I mentioned to you, they had about 30 guys in the grift over there, and 2 or 3 guys putting the big top up. And trying to think of some other grift shows that were interesting. The ringing show, they never had Griffith on the Midway. That movie they made about the greatest show on earth, they showed all the carnival game on the Midway and so forth. It was disgusting. That never took place in the ringing show. They had the gambling, but it wasn't for the public. There was enough people. There was 1,200 people on that show at one time. And those are the people who have done the gambling. I don't think I've overlooked any circus in Hugo.
What's your favorite part about the circus?
My favorite part about the circus, I guess the favorite thing that I would like to do is the announcing and making the pitches and so forth. I enjoy that. I got a picture. In fact, I just sent it to Tony. It's on her Facebook page. I sent her a whole bunch of pictures. I said, put some of these on the Facebook. We'll see what they are. And doing the peanut pitch on the show. Anybody told you about the peanut pitch? Well, that's where you sell little bags of peanuts before the show starts. And there's coupons in some of the bags, and they get a prize for them. Well, the whole idea behind that pitch is the guy that's doing the pitch. You're the one that sells the peanuts. And the little bags of peanuts, I think we sold them for $1 when I was doing it. Well, I'm making the pitch for the peanuts, and of course, you make all kinds of hand gyrations and so forth. And this one picture I got, some circus fan took a picture of me like this while I was talking on the mic, from behind me. And it's when I had all my fingers. It was just before I had my finger bit off by a chimpanzee. And
do you have any pitches you still remember?
Do I have any, what you say?
Any pitches you still remember? Can you still talk through any of your old pitches?
Oh, yeah.
Will you do one for us?
I can make a peanut pitch. Well, it wouldn't be as good as being an audience, but I can do it for you.
Sure.
Okay. I haven't done this for a long time.
Putting you on the spot.
We have just a moment or two before the show starts, and during that time, we have a very special announcement that will be of interest to each and every one of you, especially all the little boys and the girls in the audience. So if I could have your undivided attention. The Cromer Peanut Company of Columbia, South Carolina is introducing a brand new and different peanut product in the market this summer. It's going to be known as Cromer's Roasted Peanuts. They're brand new because they're roasted from the inside out in infrared ovens. It's not the old-fashioned way, where they dry the peanut out. It's done the new way with infrared roasting, and all the delicious flavors trapped right on the inside of that juicy little nut. And when you taste them, you'll say the same thing as I said. My, oh my, that's a good peanut. Now, in addition, as a special added inducement to get you to try their new product, the Cromer Peanut Company has instructed us to place on the inside of some of the bags, not all the bags, but some of the bags contain coupons. Upon that coupon, it says prize. Now, if you get one of those prize coupons, you come right down to the center ring and give it to Alan Jones, our funny old clown, and he'll give you a prize, a souvenir to take home with you. We have just 2 minutes for this advertising program, 2 minutes only. The vendors are coming through the audience one time only, 2 minutes. Here they come. Have your dollars ready, and make sure when you get your package of peanuts, you open them up right away. Look on the inside to see if you have a prize coupon. If you do, that makes you a winner. That's right. Just 2 minutes is all we have. We must hurry along. Hurry along if you will. Get your money ready because the vendors are headed your way. Now, the secret to that whole thing is a psychology behind it. When you pump those people up, talking all about there's a little bit more to it when I pump those people up, talk about the peanuts. But the whole idea of putting those people into the seats, getting those vendors into the seats, they don't do that now. Even on David's show, and I want to throw up. They stand down by the ring, and the people have to come out of the seats down to the vendors. Well, you'll sell about half the peanuts you would if you're up there in the seats. And you tell the vendors into the seats, and you go right into the seats, right to the top row, and those hands will start coming up. And hell, nobody wants to get out of the seat and walk all the way down there and buy a bag of peanuts. And hell, we sell peanuts. I've sold as many as 2,000 bags of peanuts in a day, a buck a piece. With that same pitch as her. And what she gives them is a balloon. And that makes it doubly good because the kids that don't get a prize in the tent, they'll buy a balloon on the way home. I like that, and I really enjoyed opening the sideshow openings. Anything where it required moving the people and talking and so forth, because when you're making a sideshow opening, you're looking at those faces down there, and you can, what they call turning a chip. You can, if you don't know what you're doing, you will not turn that audience at a proper time. In other words, you won't tell them to start buying tickets at the proper time. There's a moment. In fact, it wouldn't be a moment; it'd be a second. that you can look down there and see those eyeballs, and you know when, say, this is when they're going to stop by, and you tell them to buy tickets here, buy tickets over there, and go on the inside. And they had, and that's the way it works.
There is an art to it. There's definitely an art to it.
It used to be the sideshow was a big item on the circus, but the circus had to be, the total circuit had to be involved, because the people, when they come with their tickets to go to the circus, they'll line up at that marquee so they can get in there first, you know. Then it's up to the guy at the sideshow to break that line and get him to come on back down in front of your platform where you can talk to him. If you can break that line and get him down there, then you'll get him into that sideshow. And you got to tell them all, and they think you're lying, but you're not. You're telling them the truth, that that this is first, that's second. And that's what the whole pitch is all about. And you tell them what you got on the inside and so forth. I seen this monkey that bit my finger off, this chimpanzee, when I was framing this show. I was building this show for Dick Garden, the guy that's going to open in Mesquite this weekend. I went out to Orange Grove. The guy had a bunch of monkeys. They had this ape and this chimpanzee, and it looked like a gorilla. I mean, it was so big that when he was hunched down, he's still about that high, and black and muscular and so forth. And I can run back to Dick. I told him, I said, if you want an attraction in that Midway, I said, believe me, you buy that chimp. I said, I'll frame the show for it. And I said, if that thing don't get the money back the first weekend on the road, I'll pay you. And anyhow, he bought the chimp, and we built a big cage in the back end of a truck on a small cage in the front, where we could shift him into this small cage and load the show into the big cage. And his name was Tyrone the Terrible, bigger than Gargantua. I had the banners painted thing myself. And I had a guy working for him, BK's husband, Mel. And I told him, I said, no, I'm going to fight this thing into this cage the first couple of times to get him used to going in there, but I don't want you to ever do that. You stand there and watch me, because you got to be Mr. Good Guy. When you open that door, he knows he's going to get a can of soda pop, and you're not going to fight with him. I said, no, I'm going to have to fight with him for a day or two to get him in there, and which I did. I rousted that sucker and hit him with a stick and everything else, and finally got him in. Then the minute we get him in there, we'll give him a can of soda pop for a reward. And Mel, it got to the point where all Mel had to do was just open the door, and the chimp would go in waiting for a soda pop and close it. Well, Mel had to leave the show that one day, and I had to put him away. And I went in to put the sucker away, and it took me 30 minutes fighting that thing to get him into its little shifting box, and I closed the gate on him. And I had the soda pop in my hand, and I reached up to give him his soda pop through what we call a slush board, or like that. And he didn't look at the soda pop. He grabbed my arm, whammo, and they just chomped down on it. And some kid was walking through some guy that worked for the show. I'd have lost my whole arm if it hadn't been for him. I was trying to pull back, and the chimp was pulling my arm. And I said, hey, boy, I said, get a hold of my arm and help me pull it out of there. And I come out, and it was just a bloody stump. They stripped all the skin off my finger and bit the tip off of this one.
Wow.
Bad news. But it was a good chimp. And it did. It made the money. $1 a pop. And we got a $1 admission to go see it. And the first weekend out was in Fort Myers, Florida. And we got over $2,000. Chimp only cost $1,200.
Well, we have a couple more minutes before my tape runs out. Anything else? Any final comments you'd like to make?
Oh, gee whiz.
Yeah.
Every time I drive back through Hugo, it's a heartbreak, because the town is so dead now. I mean, if it wasn't for the government programs, there wouldn't be no Hugo. And the town used to be such a flourishing town. At midnight, the streets were active. The hotels were full and so forth. In the days when we had the shows in there, it was really something.
Well, Mr. Frazier, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you. I hope that everything works out well. I hope I didn't go too strong with most of this stuff.